Hello there, and a very good evening to everybody on another chilly January evening. Great to have you with us, joining us for this lecture in the Oranmore Heritage Lecture series, the first of the new year. And tonight we're focusing on stone walls in County Galway, particularly in this area, Oranmore and Mag Raollaigh. Joe Mag Raollaigh is my name. I know many of you, I'm sure many more of you know my father, John. It was him that introduced me to stone walls, what I know about them. It goes back to around the time I was 5 or 6, and myself and my brother used to follow our father around the farm, raising the gaps, as they say, that is, repairing the walls, which might have fallen for various reasons over time. And as we got older then, it fell to us not to follow, but to muck in and help as well. And in my case, I remember still as a small fella, I used to try and roll the stones out of the grass where they might have settled over a few months because I couldn't lift them. But obviously I've lifted plenty of them since then. And I suppose you could say that I've been doing it on and off for the last 40 years, believe it or not, with my father and brothers Sean and Michael. And dry stone wall maintenance is an ongoing affair on this farm because there's plenty of dry stone walls that need to be kept. Anyway, you collect a bit of knowledge and a bit of lore and a few sore fingers along the way, has to be said. So that's what we have for you in this lecture this evening. Some of my own knowledge and a good bit from my father, John, who has taken the time to put down on paper some of the facts and the figures and the information and the lore that he has as well. And by the way, any observations anyone has to add, anything you'd like to add into the session, we'd be delighted to get it. You can send it into the chat function if you can figure out how the chat function works. And you can also raise a hand at the end maybe, and we'll try and get to you. Can I just say to everybody as well that we're recording an audio version of this lecture for Galway County Council as well. As we go along, I'm going to try and share some photos with you to give you an idea of what I'm talking about and where I am talking about as well. So dry stone walls are of course widespread across County Galway. They are widespread too across all of the west of Ireland, especially in County Clare, Galway, Mayo, Sligo, Donegal. And sure, that's no surprise, of course. Sorry, now I'll just get the photograph right here. That's no surprise, of course, because our forebears would naturally use the raw material that is commonplace and workable. And there is no shortage of stone walls in this part of the world. For farmers to farm land, they needed to clear the stone naturally enough. And at the same time, they needed to create boundaries and to contain, animals or to exclude animals from crops and so on. So all those stones that they cleared from the fields quickly became useful. Now, according to our archaeological brethren, of course, the earliest example of stone walls available in Ireland are those in the Cage of Fields in North Mayo. I'll show you a quick photograph of those as well. Should be popping up there. There's one of the walls that has been excavated in the bog in the Cage of Fields, 120 kilometers northwest of us here. That actually dates back nearly 6,000 years, hard to believe it. They are the oldest in Ireland, and the Cage of Fields actually are the oldest known enclosed fields in the world too. So our heritage in stone walls goes back a very long way. And hold on a second. Sorry for a second, just a little technical problem. We're starting the video again, and there we are. Okay, there we are. Our heritage in stone walls goes back an awful long ways, as I was saying, 6,000 years in the case of the Cage of Fields, and they are widespread in Ireland. A 2012 study of the Irish countryside estimated that there are over 400,000 kilometers of dry stone walls in the country. And as you drive around County Galway, of course, and around this district in County Galway, you can easily see that many thousand kilometers of those walls are to be found here. And interestingly, when you drive around other parts of the country where there wasn't so much stone, in large parts of Leinster, large parts of Munster, you see that there aren't stone walls. They opted for what they had available there. They opted for ditches, dikes, and hedgerows to enclose land. Now, there are many different types of dry stone wall with different functions too. Here in Oranmore, they are mainly made of limestone for the most part. Some are straight, some meander slightly, some are low single stones, some are high double stones, depending on what they are intended to do. So I'm going to show you a map here now of our farm from 1837. This was a map that was done as part of the Ordnance Survey, and I'll give you a minute just to take it in. And any wag out there that might suggest it looks like it's from 1837 because of the little bits of discoloration on it, it's not actually the original. What it is got slightly discolored in storage. Anyway, if you look at the map there, the line through the middle is the Mary Road, and our farm is above it. And you will immediately notice that there are a number of straight lines bisecting the farm, or dissecting the farm. They are the fields that are laid out as they are today. They are the single stone walls dividing the fields. We're not sure when they were constructed, but they were certainly in existence before the Great Famine, because the map is from 1837. They may have been constructed sometime in the early 1800s, perhaps when landlords were looking for greater return on their assets. They used to sublet parcels of their land out to essentially middlemen, or I suppose businessmen is what they were, who would then further sublet it on again. And it was a way of getting a better value, a better return. Staying on the map, if you look above the fields there and slightly to the above and to the left, there's a dotted boundary line that tends to meander different, very different from the straight lines of the field walls. Now this is another wall, but this wall is different. This is a double stone wall, and it divides our land from our neighbours, but more significantly, it divides the townland of Oranmore from the townland of Renville West. It is a taller double wall, required a lot more work to build, and which covers a meandering path. I suspect it's probably much older than the field wall, based on the fact that it does meander, and that it isn't the efficient straight lines that were introduced when somebody wanted to get more efficiency out of the territory. Now, this double stone wall is possibly based on a track used by animals and humans alike, a cow track or boher, perhaps, boher being the Irish word, as you know, for road. And I can tell you that at the end of that dotted line, there is actually a fresh spring water well. So it would be a place that cattle would be heading towards, and thus that, I suppose, supports the theory that it may be built on a cow path. As for dividing the townlands, I mean, I can't say that all townlands in stony areas were marked by double stone walls, but there are a number of examples around here. For instance, obviously that one there dividing Oranmore, the townland of Oranmore, in which we are, from the townland of Renville West, and also the small townland of Moneyduff close by here is divided by a double stone wall from the larger townland of Oranhill. So there are a number of examples. Now, let's come back to the video again, stop the share. There we are. Yep, we're still here. Single stone walls vary greatly in height and strength, depending on the quality of the material with which they are built. But the building method around here was generally the same. The base of the wall is called a balla fideen, which is 2 feet wide, and I can show you a photograph of that as well. Now, a balla fideen basically was what was put at the bottom of the wall to give it support. If you can see my photo there, you'll see my photo there on the screen now. This is a photograph of a wall I took up in Renville the other day. And you can see the base clearly is different from the upper parts of the wall. So that lower part, the balla fideen, balla being the Irish word for wall, fideen, I'm not so sure. Somebody suggested to me that it could be from somehow derived from the word fee, which is to weave, which I suppose might make sense in that you're tying stones together, but I don't know that for certain. And if anybody can enlighten me, you're obviously very welcome to let me know. The Balafidine then, it's laid out. Stones tended to be as horizontal as you could to make them as steady as possible. And it's essentially, it's double stones laid side by side with smaller spalls, which are smaller stones thrown into the middle. Now, spalls, that word itself, S-P-A-L-S, is an anglicized version from the Irish word spally. Can we turn off that sound? Yeah, it would be great if we could. The Irish word spally, which is simply refers to small stones. Once you have your Balafidine laid down there, and again, as you can see in the picture, it's quite distinctive from the upper parts of the wall, then you move on to putting your bigger stones up. And the first row of stones there, I'll just enlarge it, you can see they're much bigger. You go for a big stone, go right across the Balafidine to sort of tie it together, and you lay your course of larger stones down, and you do the length of the Balafidine that you've prepared, and then you gradually add on your other layers, your second course and your third course of stones. Now, they're not, in this particular case, that distinctive from one another. They tend to blend in because the stone and the wall builder is looking to try and link and lock those stones together. And that's how you get your dry stone wall. That is essentially the building process involved. Now, double stone walls, they were stronger. They required more material. This is a wall with a much wider base, much larger stones. There's two faces on it, and the middle would be again filled with spalls. You put down your foundation of large stones, you fill it with the spalls, the slivers of stones, or even perhaps meadow stones that would be gathered from the field. Anybody who's worked fields around this part of the world will know that harrowing and ploughing always turned up an awful lot of what you call field stones, which essentially would be roundish kind of stones. I'm going to show you a photograph here now of a double stone wall. That's the double stone wall I referred to a few minutes ago. The one dividing our land from the other Ballia Farran, the other Renville West. Anyway, you can see from this double stone wall, if you look there as I enlarge it, obviously as I enlarge it, the stones get bigger, but those stones are very large, and there was a lot of work in building one of these walls. Very heavy stones, and the methodology was to as you lay them down at intervals, you would have to get a large, long stone that would go from one face across to the other, which would interlock essentially the two sides of the wall, would give it sort of internal stability, and would make sure that your wall was sound and strong as you built up along. These, they can go to any height, but generally a double stone, a dry stone wall, in other words, without mortar or anything added into it, would be 5 or 6 feet. They were often capped then on the top with a large stone laid on the flat right across it, or sometimes if somebody wanted to have a battlement effect, they could lay a large stone on the flat, and then the next stone would be placed on its edge, and you would, by going along like that, you would get yourself a battlement effect. And there are lots of examples of well-built double stone walls around the country. They have lasted for hundreds of years without any mortar of any kind being used in their construction. Now, there's obviously it's the west of Ireland, so there's loads of walls all around the place. I'll just refer to one other one, not a dry stone wall, but it is close by to us here, on the former Blake estate, which is now owned by Pat McDonough of Supermax. And this is, in this case, what we're talking about here is it's a large 8-foot wall, but it is held, or certainly helped to be held together with mortar included. Now, these are very high walls, built with limestone again, They were often built on estates. In this case, the wall here, which is on the Mary Road and in Renville West there, as you drive up and down, this was for a deer park that the Blakes had. But you see these walls, if you've ever visited many of the walled gardens, so as we call them, and they're all around the country, they were used for gardens. They were used for, enclosing and creating essentially a microclimate, because if you have a great big 8-foot wall surrounding an area, you can trap sun, you can stop the wind from coming in, etc., etc. So because they were 8 foot though, they were that bit taller, and mortar was used, and you can see the mortar in the walls there. That again, I mean, that's generations old there. The mortar consisted essentially of lime, which was mixed with a bit of sand and water, and that's what was put in there. The lime was obtained from lime kilns. Many of the estates had lime kilns on the estate, where they would set huge fires basically with limestone above them, and when they threw water on top of the limestones, then they would crack and fissure, and you'll be able to get the lime out of them. And that's where you got your lime from. So there was a supply available for people when they wanted it. Now, so there's some of the walls. There were features built into the walls then as well, features for humans and for animals to get around, to get through, and to travel. Styles, everybody's very familiar with them. Styles varied according to the material available to build them, and on the skill and the inclination of the builder as well. The simplest was let me show you once more. Simplest was a stone projecting from either side of the wall. You stepped up on one side, you threw your leg over onto the other side, and you were on your way. And of course, in times past, it was far, when people had to walk, they may as well walk across fields as to go by roads which were a longer way around. So stiles were a feature of a lot of field walls back in the day, and they do still exist to a great extent now, although a lot of them have been built up as well. Sometimes a stile consisted, and actually just in relation to this stile is on our own land, and those lintels that you see there, they were originally used for corn stacks to keep the corn when it was harvested off the ground. But they've been recycled now, and isn't that the great thing about stones? You can recycle them until journey's end. So they were recycled now into that style. But there are other styles, there are other approaches to styles. For instance, we've seen styles in this neck of the woods where they're essentially a V shape. So a stone is set in the ground, two lintels standing up along it, and there would be space for a person to go through, maybe turn sideways a bit, just pull themselves through, but there wouldn't be space for a large animal, cattle or horses, to get through. So they work very efficiently in that manner. There's also, there are examples of V-shaped styles as well. Sorry, there are other elaborate more styles in this area, and there's one up in the Renville estate there where they had 3 cut stone steps, and then a return at the top of the wall, and then a further step down the other side. But again, you know, the style depended, as I said, on the material available and the inclination of the builder and the resources that he was willing to put into it. Moving on then, another feature that you'll see in walls here is a thing called a purine. Now I have a photograph of one here, which is not very distant from me, but I didn't get a new photograph of it. This one's a little bit faded. It's down near Lucknarone here. And a purine simply is a gap in the wall, about 2 foot wide with the sides squared off. And then there was a lintel across the top, as you can see there, about 30 inches from the ground. And above the lintel again, then the rest of the walls from the stone were laid. So the wall was the same height right across. I've added pencil marks on this one just to make it a little bit clearer because it was rather faded. Anyway, in the construction of these purines, which were there to allow sheep to go from one field to another field. So you didn't have to take them out through a gap or bring them around by a gate or walk them up a boreen. You could let them go from into another. But they weren't made too wide, because the theory was if they were made a little bit too wide, then a couple of sheep would run into them at the one time and they might get stuck. So the idea was, and the master purine maker was, to just get it so that one sheep could go through at a time. They are a feature of stone walls, any place where there are sheep, certainly. There are other examples of purines. There's one across the bay in Roscommon, which is an inverted V with two long stones fitted into the wall. So there we go, the dinging again. And that obviously would let small animals through as well. In discussing this with my father, he has heard that the inverted V might have been used for birds as well, domesticated birds, geese or turkeys, for instance, because obviously their wide bodies would get through in the lower part of the V, while their necks could go through in the higher part of the V. So purines a feature in this area as well, as I say. Anyway, I briefly referenced at the outset that wall repair is an ongoing affair when it comes to dry stone walls as well. A few things affect their staying up. Animals in fields may decide to have a scratch against them, or a reach across them to get some vegetation, and they can knock stones. Sometimes, occasionally, you get them reaching across for other things as well, as this donkey was reaching across to have his photograph taken for a John Hind postcard back in the day, and hasn't he a fine set of teeth, God bless him. Anyway, you can see though the potential for him to knock stones off the wall. That is one of the issues that can occur with stones coming off walls at times. Other things then include the weather. Wind and rain and frost can all cause damage. The wind, obviously enough, you can see how that would be. Frost, freezing stones, thawing out, a bit of weathering occurring, that can happen. It can split stones as well, they can fall. Birds land on walls a lot, not so much that they'd knock the stones off, but something that happens frequently. Obviously, birds will eat seeds. They eat the haws, for instance, the fruit of the whitethorn bush. And when they sit on the wall, undigested haws can drop in their droppings, and they will take seed very quickly. And you see an awful lot of whitethorn bushes growing right beside walls all around the place. Not a problem at all, but when it comes to it, when the wind blows the haw, the whitethorn bush rather, it can swing left and right. I'm just trying to share a picture with you there. I think I've frozen on screen. Can we see it? Yeah, there it is, yeah. So there's the whitethorn bush. When the wind catches the whitethorn bush, it'll sway a little bit left and right, and it will knock stones off the wall as well. So that's something that happens and that you just have to deal with. So it's about maintenance from there, and it's one job I think that so far can't be automated. If you're going to maintain stone walls, you have to get out there. You have to find the stones in the grass, first of all, which might have grown around them, pulling them out, then replacing them on the wall. And from experience, I can say to you that you won't always get a snug fit when you place it on. As my father tells me, his father always said, you may have to rotate it a couple of times, up to 3 times, to get the best snug fit. And generally, you'll know that yourself. You try it one way, you'll try it the other way, and if shaking a little bit or not sitting in there nice and snugly, you might try it a third way, and eventually you'll come up with some sort of a way that it's going to fit quite well. I mentioned earlier as well the odd sore finger or thumb when you pinched yourself laying the stones down on the wall. There would also be a sore toe or two occasionally, I have to say, when the stone that you neatly plonked up on the wall a minute ago suddenly comes loose and brings down with it 4 or 5 others. So before steel toe caps, I said to Dad, you really needed to be a bit of a Michael Flatley, fleet of foot to get your toes out of the way quickly. And I've had a few of them as well, I can tell you. Looking ahead then, what is the future for dry stone walls? I suppose it's mixed, really. In areas of very good stone like South Galway, Ballinderreen, Kinvara, all that area, and onto the Burn. The stone walls can be relatively low maintenance, as the stones really to one another and they stand the test of time. And indeed, it's worth mentioning here how the people of Ballinderreen and Kinvara got together to successfully maintain their stone wall heritage there recently, when they stopped the removal of stone walls, and it's been replaced with wire fencing as the road upgrade works were taking place there. So the new stone walls, you can see them, they're now in place. And that was through a campaign and people out on the roads and making their voices known. So I suppose kudos to them. A big challenge in field maintenance, however, is the lack of labour to do the job. Fewer people are working the land, economic returns are not necessarily there in farming anymore. So wall building and maintenance are neither a priority or profitable for many people. And obviously in the past with farmers and labourers, you know, they were always traipsing through the field. They'd see a stone down, they'd put it back up on the wall. So maintenance was an ongoing thing. Now, of course, there just are fewer people going through the fields. That really gives people little enough choice sometimes, and many opting for the one thing that they really can do, and that is to replace their fencing needs from stone walls to putting up wire and pole fences. Understandable, really. You know, many farmers working on their own, they don't have the labour, they don't have the time. You can't be maintaining a full farm of dry stone walls, so they go for the wire and pole fencing, which needs far less care. Unfortunately, though, the dry stone walls are falling back to the ground. Now, it's not all negative. On the plus side, there's certainly far greater appreciation for dry stone walls now, and their place in our native built environment. There is a recognition, I think, that the skill of wall building is something that's worth hanging on to too. And there's a growing awareness too of how unique the stone walls in the west of Ireland are, and how they add to the character of the area. And that's something that's very important. As I researched this paper, I also came across the Dry Stone Wall Association of Ireland, which has been set up for a number of years now. It runs events and courses for the experienced builder and also for a builder who wants to be starting off. So that's another plus. And then you can consider the environmental schemes that are out there, which farmers are partaking in. The GLOS scheme, for instance, the Rural Environment Protection Scheme, and most of those have an eye to wall maintenance as well. That's part of the conditionality of being in the schemes. And as I said, they're unique character, important from a tourism point of view as well. I think most people will probably have encountered a tourist at one time or another who has been fairly bowled over by the stone walls that we see in this country, because you don't see them in many places. Certainly I've often spoken to some of our American cousins who really were, you know, curious and really found them quite unique and very charming. So, you know, that's just another reason they're worth conserving, if some sort of support scheme was put in place. So, I mean, you know, thoughts on that. Obviously, it's something that people need to think about for the future, about dry stone walls. I have a bit of a view myself that, you know, as it has now come to light, what we need to do is to get attention onto dry stone walls. And it has now come to light that the incoming US President, Joe Biden, his great-grandfather was a man by the name of John Hannafy, I think. Sorry, his great-great-grandfather. And he came from Ballynacorty Hill in Mary. So when Biden comes to Ireland, he'll be obviously visiting the folks up in Carlingford Lough. He'll be visiting them up in Mayo as well. And if we've any bit of luck at all, we might get him to come here to the west of Ireland and to Oranmore. We could get him to throw up a few stones on a wall somewhere and put dry stone walling in the west of Ireland onto the world map. And doesn't he look well there? A total natural. Anyway, that's where my lecture ends on this one. There's quite a number of comments coming in, so we're just going to have a look-see at them now, if you just give me a minute. Right, we'll start at the beginning then, will we? Right. Eileen says to everyone, locals are calling those new stone walls on the Kinvara Road JCB walls, as they were not well built, or sorry, they were not built traditionally by men, but JCBs. Yeah, I can see that, Eileen, all right. I suppose they're better than wire and pole fencing, but they do use the large JCBs now to do that. I've seen that in quite a number of areas where they've put in, they use, very large stones to create the walls. Hubert asked, do you say Balafidine or Balafigine? It's Balafidine, F-I-D-I for the N. It's a D, not a G, Hubert. Let me see, anyone else? And if anybody has questions, by the way, if you turn on your videos, you could raise your hand there and we will come to you. The host will unmute you if you want to add anything in. Do we have anybody coming in there now? Actually, a comment from Hubert back there. He says it's Figine in South Mayo. That's very interesting. Can you see Hubert's comment there again? Yeah, it is Figine in South Mayo. Yeah, it just shows you. One thing that strikes me too is that what's commonplace and normal in one particular area, obviously it varies from place to place. So there are different approaches, different words, obviously different lexicons. Interesting though, a lot of it derived from the Irish language. Balafidine or Balafigine, as in your case, spalls, as I mentioned there earlier on, Purine, again an Irish word. So an awful lot of it comes from the Irish language, and that is no surprise really, because this part of County Galway, Oranmore, Mary, was Irish speaking, certainly into the late 1800s. I know from our own family census forms in 1901, 1911, to our surprise that they were all down there as Irish and English speakers as well, even though there wasn't really any knowledge that they were Irish speakers in the current generations of people that are alive. But all of the farming lexicon around here as well, all of those words, the weeds and all of that are referred to in Irish as well. I'm just checking here, have we any more comments? I think we do, and I don't know, has anybody raised their hand? I can't see has anybody raised their hand. Can we see that? No, I don't think so. Anyway, look, I hope you've enjoyed the lecture. Sin a bhfuil agam díobh bhallaí clocha a nocht. With the times that are in it, let me say to you that hopefully, like our stone walls, we'll all be standing ourselves for a great many years to come. So gur míle maithí as éisteachlumm agus le cúnamh dé, casimid Ericéile Sarawat. Many thanks for listening. Hopefully we'll all get to meet soon. Take care and Happy New Year.